Blood pooled around my shattered phone, the screen still glowing with Hesper's smiling Ivy League graduation photo. The graduation that should have been mine. She stole my national merit admission ticket, stole my identity, and bought her way into my future while I scrubbed floors just to survive. When the truck hit me, my last thought wasn't fear. It was pure, unadulterated rage. I closed my eyes in a puddle of my own blood, only to snap them open to the sound of my high school alarm clock. I was 18 again, and this time Hesper was going to pay. Sweat drenched my sheets as I jolted upright, gasping for air that felt thick and heavy in my lungs. My hands immediately flew to my ribs, expecting the crunch of shattered bone, the piercing agony of a delivery truck that had T-boned my rusted sedan just moments ago. But there was nothing. No blood, no sight in bites, no crushing pain. Instead, there was the faint, rhythmic ticking of a plastic wall clock. I blinked against the morning sunlight filtering through cheap floral curtains. This wasn't the grim, windowless basement apartment I had lived in for the past 6 years. This was my childhood bedroom. The faded posters of indie bands on the wall, the messy desk cluttered with AP physics textbooks, the distinct smell of my mother's burnt toast wafting up from the kitchen. My trembling hands reached for the phone on my nightstand. It wasn't the cracked screen of my adulthood burner phone. It was an older model, perfectly intact. The date glowed brightly on the lock screen. May 12th, exactly 1 week before the merit examination. The exam that dictated full-ride scholarships to the top universities in the country. The exam I had studied 3 years for, sacrificing every weekend, every party, every ounce of my teenage youth. The exam I never got to take. Memories of my past life crashed into me with the force of a physical blow. I remembered waking up on the morning of May 19th, frantically tearing my room apart, screaming as I realized my admission ticket, the heavily barcoded, unreprintable golden ticket required for entry, was gone. I remembered Hesper standing by my locker, feigning snorts shock, holding my hand as I sobbed uncontrollably outside the testing center doors, while the proctor coldly turned me away. It wasn't until 4 years later that the truth spilled out at a drunken college reunion I catered to pay my mother's medical bills. Hesper hadn't just lost my ticket, she had stolen it. Her wealthy, well-connected mother, Beatrice, had paid a crooked testing official to swap the barcodes. Hesper sat in that exam hall, using a digitally altered version of my credentials, riding the coattails of my perfect GPA and flawless mock exam scores to secure her spot at Columbia. Meanwhile, I was flagged as a no-show, my academic reputation obliterated overnight. My mother worked herself into an early grave to support us, and I ended up a hollow shell delivering takeout in the rain until a drunk driver ended my miserable existence. I dragged myself out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. Walking over to the full-length mirror, I stared at the girl looking back at me. No dark circles, no permanent frown lines, no scars. I was young, untouched by the betrayal that would eventually kill me. A slow, dark smile crept across my face. The universe had made a mistake, or perhaps it had finally gotten something right. I wasn't just given a second chance at life. I was given a front-row seat to Hesper's destruction. In my previous life, I was naive. I believed in fairness and hard work and the unwavering loyalty of my best friend. This time, I was the predator. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text message lit up the screen. Hesper. Morning, bestie. So nervous for next week. Sleep over at my place tonight? We can totally cram for calculus together. I stared at the glowing letters. In my past life, that sleepover was the beginning of the end. It was the night she meticulously memorized my locker combination. The night she slipped a mild sedative into my chamomile tea, so she could dig through my backpack and find exactly where I kept my secure documents folder. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of innocence I had shed lifetimes ago. Me. Can't wait. I'll bring the flashcards. Game on. Hesper. Hesper's house was a sprawling modern estate tucked away in the wealthiest zip code in the county. Stepping through the massive oak double doors felt like walking into a mausoleum of fake smiles and hidden agendas. Camilla! Oh my gosh! You look so exhausted. Hesper squealed, practically tackling me in a hug. She smelled of expensive vanilla perfume And privilege. Her blonde hair was perfectly curled, her manicured nails digging slightly into my shoulders. Just studying hard, I replied, forcing a soft, believable laugh as I pulled away. You know how much this exam means to me? It's my only way into a good school. A brief, almost imperceptible flicker of pity, or perhaps contempt, crossed Hesper's blue eyes before she masked it with a wide, sympathetic smile. I know, babe, but you're so smart, you're going to do amazing. Actually, my mom made us some of her special matcha lattes to help us focus. Right on cue, Beatrice Morales glided into the foyer. She was a striking woman who wore her wealth like a weapon. Draped in cashmere, she held a silver tray with 2 steaming mugs. Camilla, sweetheart, Beatrice purred, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. How is your mother still working double shifts at the diner? The condescension in her tone was a cheese grater against my nerves. But I kept my face utterly placid. She's doing well, Mrs. Morales. Thank you for asking. Well, make sure you drink up. You girls need your strength for the big day, Beatrice said, handing me a mug. I took it, feeling the warmth of the ceramic against my palms. Last time I had downed the drink, gratefully spending the next 12 hours in a brain fog that left me unable to retain a single calculus formula. It made me desperate, made me trust Hesper even more when she offered to organize my backpack for me while I rested my eyes. Thank you, I said, bringing the mug to my lips, but not letting a single drop touch my tongue. We headed up to Hesper's bedroom, a massive space that looked like it belonged in a lifestyle magazine. We spread our textbooks across her plush rug. For the next hour, I pretended to sip the matcha, secretly pouring it into a potted, fiddly fig by the window whenever Hesper turned her back to check her phone. As expected, about an hour in, I feigned a massive yawn. Wow, I don't know why, but I'm suddenly so tired. Hesper's eyes lit up. She quickly hid her excitement behind a mask of concern. Oh, no, it must be all the stress. Camilla, why don't you take a quick nap? I can quiz you later. Are you sure? I feel bad, I mumbled, letting my eyelids droop. Positive. Get some rest. Oh, and give me your backpack. I'll put your textbooks away so they don't get bent, she offered, already reaching for my worn canvas bag. Thanks, Harp. You're the best, I whispered, lying back on the mountain of decorative pillows. I closed my eyes, steadying my breathing into a slow, rhythmic pattern. Through my eyelashes, what's it here? The moment she thought I was asleep, Hesper's entire demeanor shifted. The sweet, supportive best friend vanished, replaced by a calculating stranger. She moved silently, unzipping my backpack. Her manicured fingers bypassed the textbooks entirely, diving straight for the inner zippered pocket where I kept my clear plastic document folder. I watched her pull out the thick, embossed envelope containing my National Elite Merit Admission ticket. She held it up to the light, taking out her phone and snapping several high-resolution photos of the barcode, my student ID number, and the holographic seal. My heart hammered in my chest, a toxic cocktail of grief and rage boiling in my veins. It was real. I hadn't lost my mind. My past life wasn't a nightmare. It was a memory. She really was doing this to me. Once she had the photos, she carefully slid the envelope back into my bag, zipping it up just as it was. She was gathering intel. The actual theft wouldn't happen until the day before the exam, ensuring I wouldn't have time to request an emergency reprint. I spent the rest of the night playing the part of the exhausted, grateful friend. But the moment I got home the next morning, I went straight to work. If Beatrice Morales thought her money could buy my future, she was about to learn a very hard lesson about the price of fraud. I took my real admission ticket and locked it inside a small fireproof safe my mother kept hidden in the floorboards of her closet. Then, using my advanced knowledge of graphic design, a skill I had painstakingly taught myself in my past life, to secure freelance gigs, I created a flawless replica of the ticket. It looked identical. It felt identical. But the barcode was an intricate matrix of digital ruin. If scanned by the official testing center systems, it wouldn't just read as invalid. I had embedded it with a script that would trigger a massive fraud alert in the state education database, flagging the user for federal identity theft. But a fake ticket wasn't enough to ruin her life. I needed undeniable, irrevocable proof of her crime. I needed to catch her red-handed. The tension in the air was palpable by the time Friday evening rolled around the night before the exam. My phone had been blowing up with messages from Hesper all day, feigning anxiety, asking if we could do one final review session at my house. She wanted home field advantage. She knew she couldn't steal the physical ticket at her house without risking me realizing it was missing before I left. She needed to take it from my room, right out from under my nose hours before the test. "Come on over," I texted back. Before she arrived, I set the stage. I placed my backpack on my desk, chair the zipper, casually left half open the edge of the fake admission envelope, just barely peeking out like a beacon. Then I reached up and adjusted the small motion-activated nanny cam I had bought online. And hidden inside the eye of a stuffed bear on my bookshelf, it was pointed directly at the backpack. At 7 p.m. the doorbell rang. Hesper stood on my porch, clutching a binder to her chest. Behind her, sitting in his idling Jeep, was Landon Brooks. Landon, my high school boyfriend. Clear as throat, the boy who in my past life had conveniently dumped me 2 days after I missed the exam, claiming I was too emotionally unstable. The boy who I later discovered had been sleeping with Hesper for months and had helped her mother orchestrate the payout to the testing official. Seeing his smug face in the driver's seat sent a fresh wave of nausea through me, but I forced a smile and waved at him. He flashed a charming grin and drove off. "Hey, ready to crush this?" Hesper asked, breezing past me into the narrow hallway of my house. She looked around, her nose crinkling ever so slightly at the peeling wallpaper. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, locking the door behind her. We spent 2 hours reviewing formulas. Hesper was restless. Her leg bounced under the table, her eyes constantly darting toward my desk where the backpack sat. I needed to give her an opening. "I'm going to make us some popcorn," I announced, stretching my arms. "And maybe grab some sodas from the garage fridge. I'll be right back." "Take your time," Hesper said, not even looking up from her notes. I walked out of the room, shutting the door behind me. I didn't go to the kitchen. Instead, I stood in the dark hallway, pulling out my phone and opening the live feed from the nanny cam. On the screen, Hesper didn't waste a single second. The moment the door clicked shut, she dropped her pencil. She practically lunged toward my backpack. My breath caught in my throat as I watched her pull out the fake envelope. She opened it, verified the fake ticket was inside, and then seamlessly slid it into her own binder, snapping it shut. She then pulled a blank, identically weighted envelope from her pocket and slipped it back into my bag to make it look completely undisturbed. It was a flawless execution. She had definitely practiced this. I recorded the entire feed directly to my phone, instantly uploading the footage to 3 different cloud servers. I took a deep breath, walked to the kitchen, grabbed the snacks, and headed back into the bedroom. Hesper was exactly where I left her, innocently chewing on the end of her pencil. "Here we go," I said, setting the bowl down. "Thanks, Camilla." "Hey, I was thinking maybe we should call it a night. We need a full 8 hours of sleep. We can meet at the testing center tomorrow morning at 7:30. "That sounds perfect." I smiled warmly. Once she left, the facade dropped. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I sat at my computer meticulously drafting an email to the State Board of Education's Fraud Investigation Unit, the local precinct's non-emergency tip line, and the Dean of Admissions at Columbia University. I attached the video of the theft, the screenshots of the digital footprint showing the altered barcode, and a detailed summary of Beatrice Morales' financial transactions with the testing official. A little digging into Beatrice's public company records in my past life had given me exactly what I needed to find the digital money trail in this one. I scheduled the emails to send precisely at 8:05 a.m., 5 minutes after the exam doors locked. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear. The sky was a brilliant mocking blue. I dressed in comfortable sweatpants and a hoodie, feeling the heavy weight of the real admission ticket secured in the inner pocket of my jacket. When I arrived at the massive convention center where the state was holding the exam, the parking lot was swarming with nervous students. I spotted Hesper almost immediately. She was standing near the front entrance with Landon, her mother Beatrice, adjusting the collar of Hesper's expensive blazer. Hesper saw me and waved frantically. "Camilla, over here." I walked over, my heart beating a steady, dangerous rhythm against my ribs. "Are you ready?" Beatrice asked me, a sickeningly sweet smile on her face. Do you have everything you need? Your pencils, ID, admission ticket. I have everything, I said, looking Beatrice dead in the eye. Everything I need is right here. Good, Hesper chirped. Let's head in. They're about to open the doors. You go ahead, I said, stopping near a cluster of oak trees by the walkway. I need to use the restroom out here first. The lines inside are going to be crazy. Hesper hesitated, her eyes darting to my backpack. She was waiting for the panic. She was waiting for me to unzip the bag, pull out the dummy envelope, and realize my life was over. Are you sure we can wait for you? Landon offered, stepping closer to me. No, really. Go. Get good seats. I'll be right behind you. I insisted. Okay. See you in there. Bestie. Hesper beamed, unable to hide the triumphant gleam in her eyes. She turned and walked toward the massive glass doors, slipping her hand into Landon's. Beatrice watched them go, a proud, aristocratic smile on her face, before she turned on her heel and headed back to her Mercedes. I stood by the trees, watching as Hesper handed her ticket, my fake ticket, to the proctor at the door. The proctor scanned it. A green light flashed. It was a local bypass I had programmed, so she would get inside the building, trapping herself in the testing environment before the real trap sprang. She walked into the hall. The heavy doors shut behind her. I checked my watch. 8 a.m. I unzipped my jacket, pulled out the real ticket, and walked up to a different proctor at the secondary entrance. He scanned my barcode. It beeped valid and secure. Road G, C42. He grunted, handing my ID back. I walked into the cavernous hall, taking my seat on the opposite side of the room from Hesper. I could see the back of her blonde head rose ahead of me. She was chatting with Landon, completely oblivious to the digital time bomb ticking down. 8:04 a.m. The head proctor, a stern-looking man with a microphone, stepped up to the podium. Quiet down. Students. The doors are now locked. No, clears throat. One else will be admitted. We will begin distributing the preliminary bubble sheets. 8:05 a.m. In my pocket, my phone vibrated silently. The emails had sent. I picked up my number 2 pencil, twirling it between my fingers. I didn't look at the test booklet being placed on my desk. I kept my eyes fixed on the heavy double doors at the front of the hall. It started as a murmur in the hallway outside, then the sound of heavy boots against linoleum. At exactly 8:12 a.m. the doors to the examination hall violently swung open. 3 uniformed police officers, accompanied by the state board's chief security officer, marched into the dead silent room. The head proctor dropped his microphone. Excuse me, officers, you can't interrupt a state-mandated save it. The lead officer barked, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. He held a tablet in his hand. He looked down at it, then scanned the sea of terrified teenage faces. We are looking for a Hesper Morales. Gasps rippled through the massive convention center, breaking the sterile, terrifying silence of the examination hall. 300 heads snapped toward the front, pencils pausing over bubble sheets. The lead police officer, a tall, an imposing man with a stern jawline, did not waver. He stared directly into the sea of students, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. Hesper Morales, stand up and step into the aisle. Please, the officer repeated, his voice amplified by the sheer authority it carried. Several rows ahead of me, Hesper froze. Her perfectly pastured shoulders went completely rigid. For a split second, the polished, untouchable facade cracked, revealing the panicked, privileged girl underneath. She slowly stood up, her expensive blazer suddenly looking like a straitjacket. Beside her, Landon shrank down in his seat, his knuckles white as he gripped his desk desperately, trying to detach himself from the blast radius. There must be some kind of mistake. Officer, Hesper stammered, offering a trembling, artificial smile. She smoothed down her skirt, clinging to her arrogance like a life raft. I'm Hesper Morales. My mother is Beatrice Morales. We're major donors to the State Educational Fund. You must have the wrong person. We know exactly who your mother is. Ms. Morales, the officer replied coldly, stepping down the aisle toward her. He was flanked by the state board's chief security officer, who looked furiously impatient. Gather your belongings and step out of the row. But the exam is about to start. If I leave now, I won't get my scholarship, Hesper protested, her voice jumping an octave as panic finally began to set in. You aren't taking this exam today, the chief security officer snapped. He stepped forward, holding out a portable scanning device wired to a heavy-duty tablet. Hand over your admission ticket. Hesper's eyes darted wildly around the room. She looked at Landon, who deliberately averted his gaze, staring intensely at a blank wall. Finally, her eyes found mine. I was sitting perfectly still, my hands folded on my desk, my face contorted into a mask of absolute horrified confusion. I widened my eyes, bringing a trembling hand to my mouth as if I were witnessing a tragedy. With shaking hands, Hesper reached into her binder and pulled out the thick embossed envelope. She handed the ticket to the security officer. It's a valid ticket, I swear. You can scan it, she whispered, a desperate plea hanging in the air. She thought she was safe. She thought she held my authentic, unblemished ticket. The security officer ran the device over the barcode. In a normal scenario, the scanner would emit a soft, pleasant chime, flashing a green light to indicate a verified examinee. Instead, the machine let out a harsh, piercing siren that echoed violently off the concrete walls. The tablet screen flashed blindingly red, throwing a crimson glow onto Hesper's pale face. Federal fraud alert. Malicious script detected. What? Hesper gasped, stumbling backward. No, that's wrong. The machine is broken. The machine isn't broken. Ms. Morales, the security officer said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. But you are in a lot of trouble. This isn't just a forged ticket. The barcode embedded on this document contained a malicious SQL injection script. The moment the front door proctor scanned it, it attempted to override the state's secure database. Whispers erupted across the hall like wildfire. People were pointing, staring, and murmuring. Hesper was completely surrounded by the wreckage of her own crime. No, I didn't write any code. I don't even know what that means. Hesper shrieked, the polished heiress routine entirely abandoned. Tears of genuine terror spilled down her cheeks, ruining her carefully applied makeup. It's not mine. I didn't do it. You just handed it to me from your own binder, the security officer pointed out dryly. She did it, Hesper suddenly screamed, her finger jabbing through the air, pointing directly at me. The entire room shifted their gaze to where I sat in row G, Camilla Willinson. It's her ticket. She set me up. She gave it to me. Arrest her. The lead officer narrowed his eyes and walked up the aisle, stopping right beside my desk. My heart fluttered, not with fear, but with the intoxicating thrill of victory. I let a single tear slip down my cheek, my lip quivering perfectly. Mississippi, are you Camilla Willendens? The officer asked gently, noticing my apparent distress. Aegis. Sir. I stammered, clutching my chest. I don't understand what's happening. Hesper is my best friend. She's lying. She can't be. She gave me that fake ticket. Hesper sobbed, fighting against the second officer, who was now firmly gripping her elbow. Do you have your admission ticket, Miss Willendens? The lead officer asked. Of course, I said, softly. I reached into my jacket pocket, not my backpack, and pulled out my pristine, authentic admission ticket. I handed it to him with trembling fingers. The security officer brought his scanner over. He ran the laser across my barcode. Chime. A bright, solid green light illuminated the device. Ticket is fully authenticated, the security officer announced loudly, ensuring the entire hall heard him. Registered to Camilla Willendens. Spotless record. No, that's impossible, Hesper wailed, her legs giving out. The officer holding her had to haul her back to her feet. I took it. I saw it. I swapped it. The moment the words left her mouth, a deafening silence fell over the room again. She had just publicly confessed to theft in front of 3 police officers, a state official, and 300 witnesses. The lead officer pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. The metallic click seemed to echo louder than the scanner's alarm. Hesper Morales, you are under arrest for suspected identity theft, possession of forged state documents, and attempted cyber fraud. You have the right to remain silent. I highly suggest you start using it. As they marched her down the aisle, her hands bound behind her back, She twisted around her wild, tear-streaked eyes locking onto mine. Gone was the condescension. Gone was the fake sweetness. All that remained was raw, unfiltered hatred, but underneath it, I saw the realization dawn on her. She knew I had played her. She knew I had laid the trap, painted the bait, and watched her walk right into it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply looked at her with cold, dead eyes. The eyes of a girl who had died in the rain because of her greed. Landon, tell them. Hesper screamed as they dragged her through the double doors. Tell them my mom paid for the real ticket. Tell them. Landon shoved his head down into his arms, pretending he didn't exist. The heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off her hysterical, sobbing. The head proctor cleared his throat, picking up his microphone with a shaking hand. Well, please everyone return to your seats. We will now begin the National Elite Merit Examination. You have 4 hours. You may begin. I picked up my number 2 pencil. The graphite felt cool and solid between my fingers. I flipped open the test booklet. The calculus equations that had haunted me for lifetimes suddenly looked incredibly simple. I took a deep breath, filling in the very first bubble. For the first time in 6 years, I felt entirely, wonderfully alive. The next 4 hours were a blur of absolute focus, without the crushing weight of betrayal and the mind-numbing effects of Beatrice's drugged matcha latte. I tore through the examination sections with lethal precision. Reading comprehension, advanced mathematics, analytical reasoning. I devoured the questions. Every filled-in bubble was a nail in the coffin of my past life. By the time the proctor called pencils down, I knew with absolute certainty that I had aced it. I handed in my materials and joined the herd of exhausted students filing out of the convention center. The air outside was warm and sweet, completely different from the grim, suffocating atmosphere I had carried with me for years. But the show wasn't over yet. As I walked down the concrete steps toward the parking lot, flashing red and blue lights painted the surrounding oak trees, for police cruisers had completely barricaded Beatrice Morales's sleek silver Mercedes. A crowd of students was already forming a perimeter, phones out, recording every second of the spectacle. I pushed my way to the front, finding the perfect vantage point. Beatrice Morales was standing outside her car, her expensive cashmere cardigan sliding off one shoulder. She looked feral. Her perfectly coiffed hair was disheveled, and she was violently waving a manicured finger in the face of a plainclothes detective. "This is an outrage, an absolute farce," Beatrice screamed, her aristocratic voice cracking under the strain. "My husband's lawyers will have your badges for this. You cannot harass me in a public parking lot. Mrs. Morales, lower your voice," Detective Ramirez commanded, unfazed by her tantrums. He held a thick manila folder in his hand. "We have already executed a search warrant on your residence. We are not here to harass you. We are here to detain you." "On what grounds?" she screeched. Detective Ramirez flipped open the folder, pulling out a stack of printed emails. "My emails? On the grounds of conspiracy to commit academic fraud and federal wire fraud. At 8:05 this morning, our cybercrime division received a highly detailed anonymous data dump. It included routing numbers, IP addresses, and offshore shell company records directly linking your personal accounts to a Mr. Arthur Pendleton." Beatrice's face drained of all color. The name hung in the air like a guillotine. Arthur Pendleton was the senior testing official she had bribed. In my past life, he had retired comfortably to Florida a year after ruining my life. In this life, he was going to federal prison. Clear as throat, "I don't know anyone by that name." Beatrice Leet, her voice suddenly breathless and weak. "That's funny," Ramirez said dryly, signaling to 2 uniformed officers, "because Mr. Pendleton was apprehended 20 minutes ago at his office. He sang like a canary. He confirmed you wired him $50,000 to intercept Camilla Willenden's examination credentials and reassign them to your daughter Hesper." "It's a lie. It's a setup," Beatrice shrieked, her eyes darting wildly until they landed on me, standing in the crowd. The sheer venom in her glare could have melted steel. She lunged forward, shoving past an officer. You little gutter rat. What did you do? You ruined my daughter. I'll kill you." 2 officers intercepted her, instantly grabbing her arms. and spinning her around, slamming her forcefully against the hood of her own Mercedes. "Beatrice Morales, you are under arrest," Detective Ramirez recited, pulling her hands behind her back. "You have the right to remain silent." I watched as the cold steel clamped around her wrists. She kicked and thrashed, screaming obscenities that completely shattered her high society illusion. She looked exactly like what she was, a desperate, ruthless thief. As they shoved her into the back of the cruiser, someone gently touched my shoulder. I turned around. It was Landon. He looked pale, his charming golden boy aura completely extinguished. He kept glancing nervously at the police car, sweating profusely. "Camilla," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Camilla, you have to believe me. I had no idea. Hesper, she forced me to drive her to your house last night. I didn't know she was stealing anything. I swear." I stared at him. This was the boy I had loved in my past life. The boy I had cried over when he abandoned me at my lowest point. Looking at him now, I felt absolutely nothing but secondhand embarrassment. He wasn't a mastermind. He was a coward, a pathetic, spineless parasite who attached himself to whoever had the most power. Right now, Hesper was powerless, so he was trying to jump ship. "You didn't know?" I asked, my voice dripping with mock innocence. "No, of course not," Landon pleaded, reaching out to hold my hand. "I always cared about you. Camilla, you know that." Hesper she was manipulative. She tricked both of us. I let him hold my hand for a brief second before I ripped it away as if he were diseased. I leaned in close, ensuring the surrounding students with their recording phones could capture the audio. "Save it, Landon," I said loudly, my voice ringing clear across the parking lot. I checked the nanny cam footage from my bedroom last night. I caught Hesper stealing my ticket on video. But you know what else I caught on the audio feed before she walked into my house? Her standing on my porch talking to you on speakerphone. Landon's jaw dropped. The color completely vanished from his lips. "I heard you tell her. Make sure you grab the real one. Babe, I'm not dating a dropout." I quoted perfectly. I hadn't just recorded the video. I had recorded the sinister, hushed conversation they had right before she rang my doorbell. I had included that audio file in the email to the police. Landon took a step back, his hands raised defensively. "Camilla, wait. Let me explain." "Don't bother," I interrupted, a slow, razor-sharp smile spreading across my face. "The police already have the recording. You're an accomplice to federal fraud. Landon, I'd suggest you stop talking to me and start looking for a very good lawyer." I turned my back on him, leaving him standing paralyzed in the middle of the crowd. The police cruisers began to pull away, their sirens blaring, escorting Beatrice Morales to the same holding cell where her daughter was currently rotting. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, dialing the one person who mattered. It rang twice before she picked up. "Mom," I said, my voice finally breaking with genuine emotion. The heavy armor I had worn for 2 lifetimes started to melt away. "Mom, I just finished the exam. Yes. It went perfectly. I'm going to get the scholarship. I'm coming home." I walked away from the convention center, away from the wreckage of the Morales family, and stepped out into the brilliant, unforgiving sunlight. The past was finally dead. The future was mine. Monday morning arrived with a suffocating tension that blanketed the entire campus of Oak Ridge High. Overnight, the scandal had detonated across the internet. The videos of Hesper being escorted out of the testing center in handcuffs, followed by the chaotic footage of Beatrice Morales being pinned against her Mercedes, had gone completely viral. The New York Times even ran a digital piece on it. Wealthy donors implicated in statewide standardized testing fraud. When I stepped out of my rusted sedan and walked up the front steps of the school, the sea of students parted for me like I was Moses. Whispers echoed off the metal lockers. Fingers pointed. In my past life, I had walked these same halls as a ghost, a disgraced failure who had forgotten her admission ticket and ruined her own life. Today, I was the girl who had single-handedly dismantled the most powerful family in the county. I hadn't even made it to my homeroom before the intercom crackled to life. "Camilla Willinson, please report to the principal's office immediately." Camilla Willinson to the principal's office. I didn't flinch. I adjusted the strap of my backpack and changed direction, marching down the polished corridor toward the administrative wing. When I pushed open the heavy glass door of the main office, the secretary didn't even ask for my name. She just pointed nervously toward Principal Harrison's closed door. I knocked twice and walked in. Principal Harrison, a balding man who had spent his entire career bending the knee to wealthy PDA donors, was sweating profusely behind his mahogany desk. Sitting across from him, dressed in an immaculate charcoal bespoke suit, was Richard Morales Hesper's father, and Beatrice's husband. He was the CEO of a major logistics firm, a man used to buying his way out of inconveniences. "Ah, Camilla, please come in. Have a seat," Principal Harrison stammered, gesturing to an empty leather chair. I remained standing, crossing my arms over my chest. "I'd rather stand." "Principal Harrison, what is this about?" Richard Morales turned to look at me. His eyes were cold, calculating, and devoid of any paternal warmth. He didn't look like a father whose daughter was in crisis. He looked like a businessman managing a PR disaster. "Camilla," Richard began, his voice smooth and heavily practiced. "I asked Principal Harrison for a few moments of your time privately. I want to discuss the unfortunate misunderstanding that occurred this past weekend." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated, raising a single eyebrow. "Your wife wired $50,000 to Arthur Pendleton to steal my identity, and your daughter tried to use a forged state document to take my exam. The FBI and the State Board of Education seem to think it's a little more than a misunderstanding." "Mr. Morales," Richard's jaw tightened, a brief flash of annoyance breaking through his calm facade. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick legal document, sliding it across the desk towards me. "We are prepared to offer a highly lucrative settlement." "Camilla," Richard said, his tone dropping to a quiet, dangerous register. $250,000 tax-free, paid directly into a trust for you and your mother. It will cover any university you wish to attend, plus living expenses." I stared at the paperwork. In my past life, $250,000 would have saved my mother's life. It would have paid for the experimental treatment she needed when her heart started failing from the double shifts. It would have kept me out of that delivery truck. And in exchange, I asked, my voice completely devoid of emotion, "In exchange, you sign a non-disclosure agreement," Richard stated confidently, leaning back in his chair. "You issue a public statement to the local press, claiming you gave Hesper permission to hold your ticket, and that the digital anomaly was a glitch on your end. You withdraw your cooperation with District Attorney David Carmichael, and you refuse to testify against Beatrice or Hesper in any state or federal court." Principal Harrison cleared his throat nervously, looking anywhere but at me. "Camilla, this is a very generous offer. It could secure your future without dragging our school's reputation through the mud." I let out a low dark chuckle that slowly built into a genuine laugh. Sound seemed to unsettle both of them. "You think this is a negotiation?" I said, leaning over the desk, placing both of my hands flat on the mahogany surface as I stared directly into Richard Morales' eyes. "You think you can just write a check and erase the fact that your family tried to slaughter my future? Be reasonable." "Little girl," Richard snapped, his polite veneer completely dissolving. "You are playing a very dangerous game with people who have more resources than you could ever comprehend. If you don't take this deal, my lawyers will drag your name through the dirt. We will claim you orchestrated the hack. We will drown you in litigation until you are bankrupt." I smiled. It was a terrifying feral thing. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. "Be reasonable. Little girl, you are playing a very dangerous game." Richard's own voice echoed from my phone speaker. Crisp and clear. Richard froze, the blood draining from his face. "I'm not playing a game, Richard. I'm executing a sentence," I whispered. "And you just committed witness tampering and attempted bribery of a minor on tape." I tapped my screen a second time, sending the audio file directly to District Attorney David Carmichael, the lead prosecutor who had called me yesterday to discuss my testimony. "Have a wonderful day, gentlemen," I said, turning on my heel. I walked out of the office, letting the heavy door slam shut behind me, leaving the two powerful men sitting in the wreckage of their own hubris. By third period, the police arrived at the school, but they weren't there for me. I watched through the window of my AP chemistry class as two officers escorted Landon Brooks across the football field. The school board had reviewed the audio evidence I provided. Landon was officially expelled for conspiracy to commit academic fraud. Word spread that Ohio State University had formally revoked his athletic scholarship within the hour. He looked up at the windows as he was shoved into the back of a squad car. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I didn't smile. I just pulled the blind shut. 6 weeks later, the mail arrived. I was sitting at the small laminate kitchen table, helping my mother peel potatoes for dinner. My mother, Sarah, looked healthier than I had ever seen her. The dark circles under her eyes were fading. The stress that used to age her prematurely had evaporated the moment the news of the Morell's arrest secured my standing as the victim of a high-profile crime, which miraculously fast-tracked several victim compensation grants our way. "Letter for you, Camilla," my mom said, tossing a thick, cream-colored envelope onto the table. My breath caught in my throat. I recognized the gold-embossed seal of Columbia University immediately. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, my fingers trembling slightly as I slid my thumb under the flap, and tore it open. "Dear Camilla Willendance, congratulations. It is with great pleasure that we offer you admission to Columbia University's incoming freshman class. Your extraordinary resilience combined with a flawless perfect score of 1,600 on the National Elite Merit Examination has proven you to be a candidate of unparalleled academic and moral standing. Enclosed is your full-ride presidential scholarship package." I didn't read the rest. I dropped the letter on the table, burying my face in my hands as it choked. Sob ripped through my chest. This time they were tears of pure, unadulterated relief. The heavy, suffocating chain that had bound me to my miserable past life finally snapped. I had done it. I had rewritten history. My mother wrapped her arms around my shoulders, pressing a kiss to the top of my head, completely unaware of the lifetimes I had crossed to get to this kitchen table. 3 months later, I sat in the polished oak pews of the Federal District Court in downtown Chicago. Judge Thomas Sullivan, a stern man with a reputation for merciless sentencing in white-collar crimes, presided over the courtroom. The Morales family had been entirely dismantled. Richard's company had ousted him as CEO following his indictment for witness tampering. He was currently out on bail awaiting his own trial. But today was for Beatrice and Hesper. Beatrice Morales stood before the judge wearing a drab olive-green prison uniform that clashed violently with her remaining gray roots. She looked small, haggard, and utterly broken. There was no trace of the arrogant socialite who had handed me a drugged matcha latte in her sprawling mansion. Beatrice Morales, Judge Sullivan's voice boomed through the courtroom. "You orchestrated a complex scheme of bribery, wire fraud, and identity theft, deliberately attempting to destroy the future of an innocent, hardworking student to benefit your own daughter. Your actions display a staggering level of greed and a complete disregard for the law." The judge slammed his gavel. "I sentence you to 72 months in federal prison without the possibility of early parole, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and a fine of $500. 000. Beatrice's knees buckled. She let out a guttural, wretched sob as the bailiffs grabbed her under the arms, dragging her away from the defense table. Next was Hesper. She stood up, her hands trembling violently. She wasn't wearing a prison jumpsuit. She was still a minor when the crime was committed, but she wore a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit. The blonde hair that she used to obsessively curl hung limp and lifeless around her hollow face. "Hesper Morales," Judge Sullivan continued, his gaze shifting to the weeping teenager. "While your mother orchestrated the financial mechanics of this crime, you were an active, willing participant in the theft and the cover-up. You betrayed a friend who trusted you." Hesper squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming down her cheeks. "As a minor, you will not face federal lockup," the judge stated. "However, you are sentenced to 500 hours of community service. Furthermore, this conviction for severe academic fraud will be permanently etched onto your record. By federal mandate, you are permanently barred from receiving any federal financial aid, and your records have been flagged in the National Clearinghouse. No accredited university in this country will accept you." Hesper gasped, bringing her hands to her mouth as the reality of her sentence crushed her. Her life as she knew it was over. She would never walk the halls of an Ivy League school. She would never attend a high society gala. She was academically exiled, permanently marked as a fraud, as the bailiffs led her out of the courtroom to process her probation paperwork. She stopped at the aisle right next to where I was sitting. She looked down at me, her blue eyes red and swollen, completely devoid of the venom she had spat at me, clear as throat on exam day. Now, there was only despair. "Camilla," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of the courtroom. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please." I looked up at her, my expression perfectly neutral. In my past life, I had begged her for mercy outside the testing center. I had cried until I threw up, asking her to help me find my ticket. She had looked at me with fake sympathy and walked away. "I know you are Hesper," I replied, softly, my voice cold as ice. "But apologies don't rewrite the past. Enjoy the life you earned." I turned my head away, fixing my gaze on the empty space where the judge had been sitting. I didn't watch her leave. She wasn't worth another second of my time. Clear as throat, when I finally walked out of the courthouse, the skies above the city had opened up. A light, warm summer rain was falling, washing the grime from the pavement. I stood on the top step, closing my eyes, and let the rain wash over my face. The last time I had felt the rain, I was bleeding out on the asphalt, my life stolen, my dreams shattered by the people I trusted most. But this time, I wasn't dying. I opened my eyes, looking out at the sprawling city skyline, at the endless possibilities stretching out before me. I adjusted the strap of my bag, stepped down into the rain, and walked toward my new life. Autumn in New York City was everything I had ever dreamed of, and more. The crisp electric air of Manhattan, the golden clear as throat, leaves scattered across the historic stone pathways of Columbia University's campus, the heavy comforting weight of my textbooks. It was a symphony of a life rightfully earned. I threw myself into my studies with a ferocious hunger, maintaining a flawless 4.0 GPA in my pre-law track, while working as an undergraduate research assistant for a prominent federal judge who taught part-time as an adjunct professor. Everything was perfect. My mother, Sarah, was living comfortably in a beautiful subsidized apartment near the campus, funded entirely by a massive civil lawsuit I had filed against the Morales estate, with District Attorney David Carmichael's criminal conviction serving as indisputable proof. My pro bono lawyers had absolutely eviscerated Richard Morales' remaining assets in civil court. I hadn't taken his hush money. I had legally stripped him of his empire, funneling millions into an irrevocable trust for my mother's medical care and my future. But a man like Richard Morales didn't just lose gracefully. When you back a predator into a corner, strip him of his wealth, his wife, and his social standing, he doesn't reflect on his sins. He seeks blood. It started mid-November during midterms. I began noticing a subtle lingering presence. A dark gray sedan parked a little too long across from my favorite off-campus coffee shop. A man in a heavy trench coat reading a newspaper on the subway platform, always standing exactly 3 car lengths away. In my past life, I would have dismissed it as typical city paranoia, but this was my second time on Earth, and my survival instincts were honed to a razor's edge. I didn't panic. Instead, I went on the offensive. I leveraged my connection with my professor, Judge Carter, casually mentioning my concerns about a potential stalker tied to my high-profile civil case. Judge Carter made one phone call, and within 24 hours, the NYPD's harassment division had an unmarked car shadowing my every move. The climax arrived on a freezing Tuesday night. I was leaving the Butler Library late, my breath pluming in the icy air. As I took a shortcut through a dimly lit narrow courtyard, the campus was practically deserted, the cobblestones slick with a fresh layer of frost. Footsteps echoed behind me, heavy, deliberate, fast. I didn't run. I kept my pace steady, my hand slipping into my coat pocket to grip my phone, my thumb hovering over the emergency dial button. Clear as throat, Camille Willenden's. The voice was a harsh, raspy snarl that sent a chill down my spine. I stopped and turned slowly. Stepping out from the shadows of the Gothic architecture was Richard Morales. He was entirely unrecognizable from the polished, bespoke-suited CEO who had tried to bribe me in Principal Harrison's office. His face was gaunt, covered in a week's worth of gray stubble. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken, darting wildly around the courtyard. He wore a rumpled overcoat that smelled faintly of stale alcohol and desperation. "Mr. Morales," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the adrenaline surging through my veins. "You shouldn't be here. Violating a restraining order while out on bail for witness tampering is a guaranteed way to get your bond revoked. You ruined everything." Richard hissed, taking a menacing step toward me. He pulled a thick, rolled-up document from his coat pocket. "My company ousted me. My wife is in federal prison. My daughter is a pariah. My accounts are frozen because of your ridiculous civil suit. You took my life. You little I didn't take anything that wasn't owed to me." I replied coldly, standing my ground. "Your family tried to steal my future. I just made sure you paid the tab." Richard's face contorted into a mask of pure, unhinged rage. He lunged forward, closing the distance between us in a fraction of a second. He grabbed the lapels of a winter coat, shoving me hard against the freezing stone wall of the library. The impact knocked the wind out of my lungs. But I didn't scream. "Sign this," he spat, shoving the crumpled document into my face. "It's an affidavit stating you fabricated the digital footprint in the civil trial. You're going to sign it, and you're going to publicly recant, or I swear to God, I will break your neck right here on this pavement. I have nothing left to lose." He raised a heavy, clenched fist, his knuckles white with tension. This was the twist he thought he had engineered. He thought he could use brute force to reclaim his stolen kingdom. He thought wrong. "You're right, Richard," I whispered, staring directly into his bloodshot eyes with a chilling, predatory calm. "You have nothing left to lose. But I do, which is why I never walk alone." Before Richard could even process my words, the courtyard was flooded with blinding, high-intensity LED tactical lights. The heavy metal doors of the adjacent campus building burst open, and 3 plainclothes NYPD detectives, backed by 2 uniformed campus security officers, swarmed the courtyard, weapons drawn. "NYPD, drop the weapon. Clear his throat. Step away from the girl. Hands in the air. Right now. Detective Miller." The lead roared over the biting wind. Richard froze, his fists still suspended in the air. The realization of what he had just walked into crashed over him like a tidal wave. I hadn't been an easy target. I had been the bait. His grip on my coat loosened. The affidavit fluttered from his trembling fingers, landing in a puddle of icy slush. He slowly raised his hands, stepping back, his chest heaving with defeated, ragged breaths. "On the ground. Face down now," Miller commanded. Richard Morales, the former titan of industry, fell to his knees on the freezing cobblestones. The detectives descended upon him, roughly wrenching his arms behind his back. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the courtyard. A beautiful, symmetric callback to the day his wife and daughter had met the exact same fate. "You set me up," Richard muttered, his face pressed against the ice, his voice cracking with utter despair. "You planned this. I didn't invite you to New York." "Richard ate," I said, stepping forward, looking down at him as the officers hauled him to his feet. "You dug your own grave. I just handed you the shovel." I watched as they marched him away, the flashing red and blue lights painting the historic stone walls of Columbia University. That night, Richard Morales was booked for felony assault extortion and violating a restraining order. His bail was instantly revoked. He wouldn't see the outside of a jail cell for a very, very long time. The Morales empire wasn't just crumbling anymore. It was dust. 4 years later, the morning sun filtered through the massive stained glass windows of the cathedral, casting a kaleidoscope of colors over the sea of students dressed in Columbia blue graduation gowns. The air was thick with anticipation, pride, and the overwhelming realization that we had finally made it to the finish line. I sat in the front row adjusting the gold honors cords draped around my neck. I was graduating summa laude, ranking first in my class with a full-ride acceptance letter to Harvard Law School already sitting on my desk at home. When my name was called over the loudspeaker, the applause was deafening. I walked across the stage, my heels clicking confidently against the polished wood. I shook the dean's hand. feeling the heavy embossed leather of my diploma folder. As I turned to face the audience, my eyes immediately found my mother in the third row. Sarah Woolland looked radiant. She was wearing a beautiful, emerald green dress, her hair styled perfectly, tears of absolute joy streaming down her healthy, glowing cheeks. She stood up, clapping harder than anyone else in the room. I smiled, raising my diploma toward her in a silent tribute. We had won. The universe had tried to crush us, but we had rewritten the stars. After the ceremony, amidst the chaos of flashing cameras and thrown caps, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a message from an old high school acquaintance, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, who still thrived on hometown gossip. Attached was a blurry photograph taken from inside a greasy, rundown diner in my old hometown. My breath hitched as I stared at the screen. The photo showed a waitress wiping down a sticky ketchup-stained table. She wore a cheap polyester uniform that was a size too big. Her hair pulled back into a messy, unwashed ponytail. Her shoulders were slumped with a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. It was a look I knew intimately. It was the look I had worn every single day of my past life. It was Hesper Morales. The text beneath the photo read, "Spotted Hesper working the graveyard shift at Denny's. Heard she lives in a trailer park out by the highway now. No college would take her after the federal fraud flag. Crazy how things turn out." Right. I stared at the image of my former best friend. There was no Beatrice to buy her a matcha latte. There was no Richard to write a check and make her problems disappear. Landon had abandoned her long ago, currently working a dead-end construction job after his scholarship was revoked. Hesper was completely, utterly alone, trapped in the exact miserable existence she had condemned me to in my previous life. A profound sense of closure washed over me. I didn't feel the burning, toxic rage that had consumed me when I first woke up in my childhood bed. I didn't feel the need to gloat or laugh. I just felt free. Karma wasn't a myth. It was an architect, and it had built Hesper Morales the exact prison she deserved. I deleted the message, blocking the number. I didn't need to look backward ever again. The past was a ghost, and I was entirely alive. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and walked out into the brilliant, vibrant sunlight of New York City. My mother was waiting by the gates, holding a massive bouquet of yellow roses, ready to go celebrate. "Counselor," she asked, her eyes crinkling with happiness. "More than ready, Mom." I smiled, linking my arm through hers. "Let's go." We walked down the bustling streets, leaving the shadows of betrayal, theft, and revenge permanently behind us. I had been given a second chance at life, a stolen ticket to rewrite my destiny. I didn't just take the test. I aced it, and this time nobody was ever going to take my future away from me again. Wow, what an absolute roller coaster. If Camilla's ultimate mastermind revenge against her toxic best friend had you cheering on the edge of your seat, you know exactly what to do. Smash that like button. Share this incredible story of karma and justice with your friends. And don't forget to hit subscribe for more mind-blowing, dramatic Reborn revenge stories just like this one. What would you have done if you were in Camilla's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next video. Stay ruthless,